Hello, I'm David Tavárez. I am professor of anthropology at Vassar College, and this is an installment in the tiny lecture series for Archaeology Now. Today I'm going to speak about Zapotec civilization, which is part of the complex of Mesoamerican civilizations of Mexico and Central America. I will focus on a very important corpus of calendrical and ritual texts that were produced in the second half of the 17th century in northern Oaxaca, central Mexico, in the province of Villalta. And this work comes from a forthcoming book on Zapotec time, the cosmos, and calendars. Our story begins after a small-scale rebellion in the town of San Francisco Cajonos in September of 1700, which ended up in two Zapotec informants being lynched by their community because they had told the Dominicans who were residing in the community about a non-traditional set of practices that were regarded as idolatrous by the church. After a trial and the execution of 15 of the people who were regarded as leaders in this riot, the incoming Bishop of Oaxaca, Fray Angel Maldonado, decides to extend an offer of amnesty from idolatry prosecution to everyone who is living in the province of Villalta. In order to do this, he sends a Zapotec man who had been convicted of idolatry with the bishop's own pectoral to proclaim this act of clemency, which is also an act of coercion, of course. And as a result, more than 100 Zapotec, Chinantec, and Miji communities decide to turn information about their ritual practices and what they use for their rituals to representatives of the bishop. 37 Zapotec towns turned in the largest corpus of indigenous calendars preserved in the colonial Americas. These are 102 calendrical manuals and 4 collections of ritual songs for Zapotec deities, ancestors, and Christian entities. Unlike other materials in the colonial world, these documents were made by Zapotec ritual specialists for other ritual specialists and sometimes shared with local elites, church singers, and notaries who were also part of their circle. These manuals contain details of observances, instructions for offerings to Zapotec deities and ancestors, auguries, correlations with the Christian calendar, eclipse observations, and cosmological explanations. These are multi-layer instructions about how to perform different ritual practices, and at their center they have a count of the 260 days that comprise the Divinatory calendar in Mesoamerica. These 260 days are made up by a combination of 20-day signs named after forces of nature or animals, and the numbers from 1 to 13. 20 multiplied by 13 gives us the 260 sacred names of the calendar. From those 20-day signs, we also have 5 possible sets of 4 signs each that can name a year of 365 days. So you have the 260 day divinatory count, which is used to name people, to find out the best day to give offerings to particular deities, and the 365-day count, which has no leap year correction, unlike our Gregorian calendar. And those two together are also interdigitated with Mesoamerican notions of the cosmos. The best expression of this is Folio 1 from Codex Feyerabey Meyer, which features at its center the Lord of Time, called Xutecli in Nahuatl, surrounded by 4 cardinal directions, each cardinal direction with a color, sacred tree and a bird, and 2 deities. In this diagram, east is on top, west is on the bottom, and also you have 2 different passes through the 260-day divinatory calendar. The most notable of which actually goes around each of the 4 cardinal directions, but also goes around 4 intercardinal directions, which in this illustration from the top left are reed, flint, house, and rabbit, which are the year bearers, meaning the day signs that could name a 365-day year in the Nahuatl and the mystic tradition. The Zapotec set of year bearers is different because the Zapotec tradition goes back to the 17th century, thus being the oldest calendrical and writing tradition in the Americas. And they're named Wind, Deer, Soproot, and Earthquake. There is at least an example of a diagram that resembles very strongly the illustration of February Mayer 1, and this comes from Manual 27 from the colonial Zapotec calendars. But most calendars actually have a different theory about the interdigitation of time and space, and this is best represented by a diagram in Manual 11, which gives us bird's eye view of the entire cosmos from a colonial Zapotec perspective. You have the House of Earth, Yoyechelayo, at the center. This is where humans live. 8 levels up, you have Yoyaba, House of Sky. And then if you descend down 8 levels below Earth, you'll find Yogabila, the House of the Underworld. In most of the colonial Zapotec corpus, you have lots of indications about how time intersects with this cosmological scheme. It is said that the first 5 days correspond to the House of Earth and its 4 supports, represented by circles in this diagram. And then you go up 8 levels. 5 plus 8 gives you 13, which is the first group of 13 days. There's going to be 20 groups of 13 days throughout the divinatory count because it's 260 days. So after that first 13-day period, you end up at House of the Sky, where the procedure is repeated. You also have 5 days associated with House of the Sky, 8 days associated with the 8 levels from between Sky and Earth. That's also 13. So you end another 13-day period. You start again at House of Earth, and you go down to Underworld. And this cycle is repeated endlessly throughout the cosmos and throughout time. Now, this is not just a simple vertical movement, like pressing a button in an elevator and asking for a floor. It's actually far more complex. Most of the colonial Zapotec calendars also give us a cycle of 4 different places for each of the days in the 260 day divinatory count. And these 4 places have very, very interesting and strong correlations with the 4 intercardinal directions in February Mayer 1. So just as in that codex, the days go around in elliptical spiral motion around the cosmos. In the Zapotec version of the cosmos, you also have each day going in spiral direction, each 4 days being associated with 4 different intercardinal directions and going up in a spiral up and down the cosmos in endless motion. So this has given you a sense of how time and space came together in the colonial Zapotec version of this spatio-temporal continuum. I want to thank the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation for providing funding for parts of this work. I thank you for listening, and I invite you to hear other tiny lectures from the Archaeology Now series. Thank you very much.